I'm a film buff, or consider myself a film buff. I'm also part of a unique sort of a culture of people that had to sit through a number of religious films, Christian films. When I was a believer in high school, Christian high school, they'd bring in these movies and they'd bring the entire student body in and they would show us these films. We did, of course, the Thief in the Night series. We did one called Super Christian, and just terrifyingly bad movies. Well, here it is in the year 2016. And to my delight, I discovered there's an entire podcast dedicated to these gems, to these wonders of religious cinema. They watch the film so you and I don't really have to. And I'd like to welcome those guys to the show today. It's the God Awful Movies podcast crew. Thank you so much for being here. It's a real joy.
Thanks for having us, Seth.
All right, so each of you real fast, give me a quick profile of yourselves as an activist, as a host, whatever. I'll let you start, Eli.
So I'm a comedian from New York City, and I was actually a fan of Noah and Heath's show when we worked together in a toy store almost 6 years ago at this point. And I came on to do a guest spot on The Scathing Atheist, which is the show that God Awful Movies came out of, and people seemed not to hate it. So we came up with more and more reoccurring bits until God's Not Dead came out, and that was the first movie review we ever did. And obviously people loved the fact that there was someone out there talking about these movies the way they deserve to be scorned. And so we did more and more, and then eventually we just decided to make it its own show, and we've done 37 episodes and still cruising.
I'm coming back to God's Not Dead. We can't let that go.
I'm coming back for him.
Coming back to that. All right, Noah, talk to me. Give me your story.
Well, I'll tell you what, I got involved in atheist activism a number of years ago, first through podcasts like your own, eventually started The Scathing Atheist. That was about, 3.5 years ago now. And what we find is that there are, a lot of really good podcasts, like outreach podcasts in atheism. And we didn't feel like there were enough podcasts where atheists could go to just be amongst themselves and have some fun. And it seems like roasting Christian movies is something that we can all kind of get behind. I feel like it still has a certain amount of value because it does give you the ability to look at what the Christians are telling themselves. It's almost like you're a fly on the wall when they're having a conversation they don't know you're listening to. And at the same time, it arms you against a lot of the people that say, oh, nobody believes that anymore. That's the Christianity from the 1500s. Well, no, it's grossing 8 figures at the box office. So I think they still think that.
All right, Heath, give me your story in a nutshell.
All right, real quick. I'm a bartender by trade. I studied that in college, very useful. And I also like terrible movies and roasts. And so we started kind of just doing that. I got into this movement thanks to this guy right here, Noah Lugeons, and we started doing that Scathing Atheist podcast, and then we got involved with Eli, and now we're doing awesome movies that I would have loved to watch anyway, and now I get to do professionally.
All right, so these guys have allowed me to play along. I get to sit in the sandbox with them as we review some religious films and set up all 3 of the movies we're going to be doing on the broadcast today, so we can kind of give them a preview before we get into the first. So somebody take that, would you?
Well, I'll say, we're going to start off with my personal least favorite movie that we've ever done. It's a movie called Matter of Faith that's all about how horrible evolution is and how you should never send your children to secular colleges. Great message to be sending there.
And it falls into one of the very important categories of Christian cinema, which is we could totally win a debate if we want to, we just don't want to. My girlfriend lives in Canada, you'll never meet her. And it's king. I mean, if you hated God's Not Dead, you will love Matter of Faith. Because here's the thing about God's Not Dead, and we said we were going to come back to it. God's Not Dead, you watch it and you go, that's silly. A philosophy professor would never do that. But this is God's Not Dead about whether or not rocks exist. It's phenomenal. I just want to jump. There is a scene where the protagonist of the movie interrupts a debate, cries, threatens, and then forgives his quote-unquote opponent, and then walks off the stage, and he is supposed to have won. It is the single most beautiful thing that's ever happened.
And it's also the sanest of the 3 movies that we're going to be doing, too. Well, we've also got If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? This is a phenomenal anti-communism scare flick from the 70s. It's an absolute cult classic. And then also International Guerrillas, which we figured we wanted to be all-inclusive, so we figured we'd throw a Muslim movie in there, too. That is a phenomenal, believe it or not, big-budget Bollywood movie about three brothers taking on Salman Rushdie with the help of their sidekick, Quran.
Now, what they didn't tell me when they set this film up, hey, Seth, we think this would be great. But I don't remember. Maybe you did tell me it was 3 hours long.
Did we not mention that?
I think very much told you. I was like, it's 3 hours long.
Maybe I just didn't want to hear it. Maybe I just didn't want to acknowledge it. All right, film number 1, religious film number 1 on the God Awful Movies podcast. And again, by the way, everybody, I'm going to make sure to link the actual God Awful Movies podcast itself in the description box of this show so it can be easily found and you can go check out all the other shows they have done. I would be curious. I haven't heard your take on God's Not Dead, but I would love to be able to see and hear it. Let's start with A Matter of Faith. Eli, kick me off. What's the story?
A Matter of Faith is about a young girl who goes to the university. Do they ever name the college in the movie? They sure don't. Why? Because they've never heard of any real universities. So she goes to the university, but her parents are concerned because her new science professor is an evolutionist. He doesn't even teach the possibility of creation. So, being a concerned father, her father, who looks like someone got trapped in a spray tan machine for 450 years in a row, decides to go into his office and challenge him to a debate. When the professor, played by Harry Anderson, the comedian Harry the Hat from Cheers, who apparently went crazy or was kidnapped into doing this movie, accepts his debate, and the rest of the movie is about how bullying and terrible it is when evolutionists accept debates from creationists and win, culminating in the single greatest scene of all time, one I already teased, which is where Clarence Gilliard of Left Behind fame, who is a creationist professor who gave up that life and won't go back into it, rises onto stage like Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, only to destroy his opponent by openly weeping during a conversation, screaming at him, saying he wanted to kill him, and then not allowing a response, and walking out of the building.
Right. And also, for the record, it was a tag team WWE style debate. That's how Clarence Gilliard got on the stage. He didn't start the debate. He tapped in.
It took me a second with Gilliard. I couldn't place him, and then I realized this was the guy who was handling all the surveillance for Hans Gruber in the Die Hard film.
Oh, yes, that's right. He's also the sidekick from that Chuck
Walker,
Norris.
Texas Ranger with Chuck Norris.
Yep.
It took me a second. I thought, well, I'm glad he could find work, but oh my God. The moderator has no problem with this guy just waltzing out of the auditorium at the very end and then doing, I counted a 7-minute diatribe from the stage from a guy who wasn't even on the debate roster. Boggles the mind.
What's so beautiful about it is that they never at any point in this debate discuss evolution. They start with abiogenesis. They talk about the Big Bang, the origins of the universe, the existence of God, but never does evolution come up. The whole movie is billed as this big evolution debate. And when it comes down to it, that's kind of off topic. I wanted the debate moderator so many times to say, hey, should I mention evolution?
That ruins the
Did you notice that the film seems to self-consciously want to relate to pop culture, but it doesn't really know how, right? So the protagonist is this young lady, wholesome, but also kind of contemporary, kind of could blend in. But then again, she also looks like she's sort of a product of a religious homeschool. I mean, it's this, you can feel them really stretching to try to integrate her into an organic storyline. And I felt that there was a scene where she's at a college party. And the college party reminded me of that dance sequence in the Brady Bunch movie. You know?
It's my favorite scene in the movie, and I get to do it now because we're on camera. Literally, they have all the – we didn't get to do this on the episode. All the kids in the background, and there's just a girl, and she's just doing this.
Might as well be the Carlton dance.
That's what they were told. Yeah, she Google imaged dancing and then prayed for an hour and a half.
Along the same lines as you're talking about trying to make this more appealing to the, you know, to the kids these days, the greatest scene in that movie for me is when we get the creationist trash talk moment This was so incredible. The
Goodwill Hunting swoop in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wonderful.
So at one point, someone is talking to the young girl. Her dad is going to debate the evolutionist professor, and everybody knows about this. And this guy comes up and he says, Dr. So-and-so is going to make your dad look silly. And then this creationist character, side character, swoops in to help her out by saying to this interlocutor, does your mom look like a monkey? Does your grandma look like a monkey? And the evolutionist, of course, is stunned. He has nowhere to go with this. So I guess that's supposed to be that moment where all the kids are going like, oh, I'm going to use that one.
and this is like he chose the wrong cup in Indiana Jones.
Right.
Or how he reacts to was your mama. He's like, it's like Scanners. I expect it would have been more realistic if he just laser-eyed him and then his head blew up.
Do you guys notice that the father admitted that he was ill-prepared for the debate after he agreed to do the debate? He goes to a church buddy and he says, I'm not sure I'm really ready. I'm not sure I'm prepared to defend these arguments. And then he has to go find Clarence Gilliard to go back him up. And Gilliard is the one who actually, quote unquote, wins the debate. It was bizarre that this guy's so sure of himself then comes out and he says, actually, I may not know what the hell I'm talking about. Anybody else catch that?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And also, why would you make the professor so nice? It's your movie. And this is something we talk about on the show all the time. But they could have made him be like, I am the evolutionist, and I will kill your god. I love him, but I will kill him. And instead, Harry Anderson's like, what a great topic of discussion. Do you feel comfortable talking about it? And he's like, I'll go get you. And then the moment he leaves the room, he's like, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, he cornered me into the debate. Well, I love that too, because what a brilliant dichotomy that we're being shown, or a dichotomy is probably the wrong word there, but what a brilliant thing that they're actually admitting to in this movie, which is, I am willing to go to this professional, to this biology professor, and tell him he's wrong without having looked into the debate at all. Later on in the movie, we see him reading a high school biology textbook. It's like, dude, I think you're a little underprepared for this.
Did you notice that the professor was set up, the evolutionist was set up as a guy who simply reads and teaches out of his textbook, right? He wasn't an expert in evolutionary biology. He didn't actually know the science. He wasn't someone who had been vetted as an educator in the field of evolution. He was a guy who was handed textbooks by them evil scientists, and that's what the students are going to learn. He actually was painted as just some parrot for the Star Chamber scientists down there somewhere, all those guys who want to kill God.
Not just that, but he teaches evolution wrong in one scene. He's like, in the 1940s, the Olympics, people only ran this amount fast, but since then, we've evolved in the last 60 years. In 10 years, you'll have an extra arm. Isn't that great? And all the students are like, that makes sense. And she turns to him, she's like, I don't know about evolution. And I'm like, that's because that's not evolution. That's something they tried in the concentration camps. They're like, let's cut off his arm and see if the baby has one.
Now, the entire last third of the film is the showcase piece. It's like the big courtroom scene, right? The courtroom climax, which is, I guess, supposed to be a moment of high tension. Somebody sort of summarize what the dad's position, what was his argument?
I think I can represent it pretty well. And Seth, I'll try this on you. How many fingers am I holding behind my back?
I have no idea.
Then it's infinity. I think that's a good way to put his opening volley.
Any
other thoughts on a matter of faith?
Well, I think thoughts and a matter of faith are two words that just don't belong together at all. But there's a game that we play unintentionally every time we watch one of these movies, which is, what actor from my youth will be ruined for me today? You know, I was a huge fan of Night Court, and I watched Harry Anderson stand up. I was a big fan of Magic growing up. And so it's constantly, we watch these movies, and you're like, oh, no, Cliff Clavin, oh.
Yeah, watching Christian movies is like watching grandma fall downstairs. You're like, no, she's not okay. She's not okay. I mean, I'm okay, but she is not okay.
I don't know. There was nothing I could sink my teeth into. I was just sort of waiting for the inevitable debate. And in that last scene, when the evolutionist, the professor, just has to look kind of concerned and a little thoughtful, like the seeds have been planted in his heart, and one day he'll come to know Jesus. We all knew it was coming, and it actually happened. You know, go figure.
Do you lose when you make the other guy cry in a debate? I guess I lose. I thought I won when I did that, but nope.
Well, and I think anybody who's familiar with evolution debates knows that the opening statement that Harry Anderson makes is just this brilliant series of straw men that everybody arguing against evolution would love to hear, you know?
Yeah, the basis of his evolution argument was Freud, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but it was Freud.
It terrifies us, doesn't it, to see evolution represented by people who have only been taught the caricature of evolution. And I was one of those people for the longest time, you know, from goo to the zoo to you. Whee! You know, evolution. We grew up with a picture of Darwin on the monkey's body.
That does rhyme. That's very catchy. I can see how that, yeah, okay.
And if they actually studied evolution, they wouldn't be creationists. Like, you can't say, the joke we made on the show is like, you can't send your research team out and be like, find out what evolutionists really believe, because they never come back. It's like the joke about the Scotsman over the hill. They just never come back. You can't, and keep going like, okay, what'd you find out? Yeah, we don't want to make this movie anymore. Dang it. All right, fine. Someone go watch William Lane Craig take 4-Ambium and describe evolution. All right, there we go. We got it.
You guys ready to move to film number 2? Somebody set me up, would you?
Well, Eli, you did such a great job with Matter of Faith. I'd love to hear your assessment of If Footmen Tire You.
All right. Our second movie is If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? In the 1970s, a shock director from one of the exploitation films hits his head against something hard and finds Jesus. He uses the skills of what I assume was robbing a ketchup factory and a church group that promised they were only going to have to be there for a couple of hours, mixed in with Alfred E. Newman's syphilitic grandpa just ranting at the camera for what appears to be 800 years, but is actually only about 40 minutes to bring you If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? A vision of the post-communist United States where Jesus is gone and the communists have completely taken over.
What do you think of the future of America? Are we going to experience years of prosperity? Or will we be trampled down under the feet of our enemies like the horses in the book of Revelation trample down God's enemies?
Yeah, then we get to watch them. Apparently the horsemen are forcing all the Christians to have a splash fight against their will or something like that to represent just how bad it's going to be in the future.
You guys notice how many churches were in the opening credits? It was like this Baptist church, this Baptist church, this Baptist church, this Baptist church. In the opening credits of the film, it was like some sort of joint Baptist project.
One of those churches is in the town that we live in.
Yeah, Bemis Road Baptist Church.
In Valdosta,
right.
Georgia. Yes, I've actually visited the church, and they're like, there's a sign there that says, please don't throw rocks. We had no idea how bad that movie was going to be.
We're moving. We're moving soon.
If you've ever wondered, hey, what would happen if Donald Trump's great-great-grandfather got 95 shots of Jameson in him and was allowed to talk 3 inches from a camera and then everyone had to act out whatever came out of his brain? That's If Footmen Tire You, What Would Horses Do? It's just Estes Perkle being like, and then you know what else? They're going to come and they're going to take all your cat litter and they're going to make you eat it. And then they just get some 19-year-old strong 5 sitting in front of the camera going, oh, comrade communist, please don't make me eat the cat litter. For 50 minutes.
Well, that's the entire movie. It's this guy describing all the terrible things that the communists are going to do when they take over and how the only thing that can save you is Jesus.
We see sort of this Jezebel character, right? This young woman who she's not interested in the end time. She's not interested in the approach of the evil communists. She wants to go out and smoke and make out and do all the stuff that people in the world do.
You pick me up after services, you hear? I keep telling you I've got to keep up my image. You know, be seen in the proper places.
I'll be here, baby.
Sure you don't want to come in?
Not on your life, baby. I'm a lover, not a Christian.
Of course, we're just waiting for something to strike her conscience and the tears flow, which, ta-da, they did. But I was struck, guys, by the notion that the producers of the film, and this is true in our third film as well, were actually kind of getting off on the violence that they were warning us to try to avoid. Did you guys catch that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, these rapture movies especially, and this one wasn't exactly a rapture movie, but it sort of, it played like a rapture movie.
Noah, set some of the violence up to give a descriptive to the audience, the kind of crap that we were watching.
Well, like, for example, they show an extended period where one of the tortures that the communists love to do is put a series of pitchforks facing up and then force a bunch of kids to try to hold their father over them as long as they can. and we watch over and over again as this guy's lowered onto these pitchforks and stabbed repeatedly.
Kind of slowly, like, ow, it's pushing my skin a little bit. Don't do that again. And they do it again.
Oh, we also get over and over again, we get scenes of large swaths of Christians being shot, and then the camera just lingers on their dead ketchup-covered bodies for a very long period of time. I think that happens something like 21 times during the movie.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the communist takeover of the United States. This is the end of democracy, as you and I know it.
So I'm watching with amusement, right? I'm watching and I'm like, it is what it is. And they come to this scene where they bring this, I'm guessing, a 10-year-old boy. You guys know where I'm going, right?
The greatest scene in the history of the film, yeah.
They bring this 10-year-old boy, and the pastor's narration is talking about the things they do, these evil communists are going to do to 10-year-old boys. They're going to take a bamboo shoot, a long stick, a long piece of bamboo with a sharp point, and they're going to take it and ram it through the child's ear so it comes out the other side of his head. Now, this is one of those bizarre, it's like that Duck Dynasty guy, remember when he was doing the rape fantasy and during a sermon at some point, he warning people about the evils of a godless world, and you got the vibe he was kind of getting off on the violence of it. Mm-hmm. And they actually bring this kid in, and they show this guy. Was he dressed in a North Korea uniform? I mean, did you guys peg the uniform?
It was a communist uniform. It was a communist accent.
It was a communist uniform and a communist accent. Yeah,
mm-hmm. The accents were spectacular.
So they
somewhere between Boris and Natasha, and someone having a stroke at a Denny's drive-thru. Boris and Natasha went to a Denny's drive-thru, and then he smelled burnt toast.
And they've all got the glued-on mustaches, and they're all doing that sort of Dr. Evil laugh. And all of a sudden, he's got this kid, and he's holding him. He's got him in a headlock, and he takes this bamboo shoot, and the camera sort of pans away as you hear the boy screaming. And then they come back, and the boy, still alive, has a bamboo shoot in one ear and poking out the other with Heinz 57 or whatever. It splashed all over his shirt. And it was at that moment that I started to get pissed off, because now I'm thinking, these poor kids, they just got drafted into this propaganda film, and it just makes my blood boil to think about what they were doing to these young kids.
Right. And realistically, he would vomit there. Wait, no, he does. It's cool. He vomits there. We got to see that too.
And there's so much of this, though, and I think it all comes back to this, again, this sort of rapture fetish that says, when Jesus comes back, all that mean stuff you said, and every time you made us feel silly, you're going to get it for that. And that's what we're watching. We're watching that fantasy play out in a lot of these movies.
It's like fear pimping.
Right.
The selling of fears to sort of, and actually what I started to wonder is I thought, actually, the ministers who put this together are guilty of the same stuff that they are accusing the evil communists of doing during the apocalyptic end times, right? They're using fear to control people. He's warning, they're going to come and use fear tactics to control you. By the way, in this film, I'm going to use fear tactics to do the very same thing.
What I think is so fantastic is that there's actually a scene where they say, they will make you sit on benches and listen to speeches.
Right.
Communism is good. Christianity is stupid. Communism is good. And then 4 minutes later, we flash forward and he's going, except Jesus. And people were sitting on uncomfortable wooden benches watching this movie. And you got to wonder if there's some baby Seth out there who was just like, excuse me, this is all very, very conflicting.
You will not work 5 days a week. You will not work 6.
Instead, you'll work 7 days a week, 363 days out of the year. You'll only have 2 days a year off. Those 2 days will be used to praise the communist takeover.
And also they're focusing in this movie on the brainwashing of the children, right? And so we see this scene where they've got a bunch of kids in a classroom, and the evil communist is standing up there going like, "Oh, so you believe in Jesus, huh? Well, pray to Jesus for candy." And then he waits, and there's no candy, and he's like, "Now let's ask Fidel Castro for candy." Guy comes in and starts giving him candy, and I'm thinking, wait, okay, are you trying to say that indoctrinating children is bad? Is that the message that you're sending? The whole movie is that, is like you say, him accusing someone else of theoretically doing the thing he is actively doing at the time.
Have you guys noticed in religious films that they try to portray the vices of the world, but they know they can't go too far, right? I mean, it's like they try to portray sex, but they can't show any skin or almost any physical touch. So they produce these awkward scenes where carnality is supposed to be taking place. And I think there's one in this film where she's with her, the guy who's teaching a class on
the erogenous zones.
Boys and girls, as I have discussed with you many times before, I personally believe that premarital sex is necessary. And now we will go on to discuss the 7 erotic zones of passion in every woman.
This was when I started to finally get interested in the film, right?
So was I, Seth. So was I. Made the same my brother from another mother. I am the same objection. I got a notepad out and everything. I was like, finally, this podcast's worth it.
But they cut away to the woman, and she's out with this guy, and I don't know, are they making out and smoking?
All at once.
Like 7 cigarettes at the same time, yeah.
Yeah, they've got a beer, a cigarette, and they're making out, yeah.
They're drinking coffee from 7 mugs. It's crazy.
It's like they're speaking a language using a translator that was created from another translator. I mean, it's like they can't participate in what people actually do and how they do it, and yet they're trying to recreate it on screen. It's awkward and ham-handed.
And by the way, this is not the only movie. I don't think we've watched a single Christian movie where 2 characters kiss each other and do not vomit in their mouths a little bit. I don't think that happens once.
It's a running joke. Well, and the other thing, too, is it crops up in the most bizarre ways. Like, we just watched a trilogy where the bad guys were this atheist biker gang, and over again we have to cut to the atheist biker gang, but they can't swear, and it just everything becomes like these atheist bikers going, oh gosh darn it, man, you don't have to be that way. I mean, golly. Hilarious.
Eli, you got to talk about the decapitation scene with the kid. You got to.
So the final scene of this movie is the greatest thing to ever happen to anyone. Kings have been crowned with less joy than you will watch this scene. So they've murdered everybody in this church, and everybody's got blood all over them. And Kurt Schilling would have looked at all this blood and said, "That looks a little fake. That's how terrible it looks." But they get this fake, everyone's covered in ketchup, and the kid, they're all dead. The kid comes out, and he's got a painting of Jesus, like a little painting of Jesus, and he takes the kid's painting of Jesus, and he goes, "Where's my mama? Where's my daddy?" And he goes, "Do not worry about them. The state will take care of," like he's Count Chocula on meth or something. "The state will take care of you. And he throws the picture down, and he's like, "Step on your Jesus, and you can come with us." And the kid's like, "No, I won't." And he's like, "Do it or I will cut your head off." And you're like, oh, all right, we're going to see the conversion of this child into a communist. And the kid's like, Jesus looks right into the camera, and he goes, "Jesus, you died for me, and so now I'm prepared to die for you." And then he cuts the child's head off. His body stays standing up, who knows why, and kicks it away. And then we cut back to the movie, and nobody's like, "What?"
I'm trying to put myself in the place of the director who's directing the young actor child. All right, here's what's going to happen. He's going to simulate decapitating you with this blade, How old was the kid, do you think? Another 10, 11-year-old, something like that?
I would be 0% surprised if they just actually decapitated a kid. This movie is so crazy that if you told me that, I'd be like, sure, yeah. They're crazy people. That's why they would do that. These aren't the people that wouldn't decapitate a child for a movie.
So then I don't know if she was the protagonist or not, but the young lady in the audience, what was it that finally sent her back to Jesus? What was the
It was that when he's telling the story, of course, they're reenacting the story that Estes Perkel is telling as part of his sermon. And so when he cuts the kid's head off, suddenly we cut to her standing up and screaming, "No!" And it's not, "No, stop talking about this. This is such a damaging thing to be saying when there are children in your church." It's, "No, I need to find Jesus quick before this happens." Now, of course, they also tied this into, I guess she had a dead mom who they throw into the movie 2 or 3 times just to confuse you.
And the mom looks like she should be on the front of a 99-cent gallon can of pasta sauce. She's wearing a hairnet at all times, including her own funeral in the movie. Her funeral is in the movie, and her hairnet is still on. And so she leans by her coffin, and you could see the woman breathing, because that's the most difficult thing that actress ever does. She's like... But yeah, it's that, and then she gets on her knees with Estes Perkle, which, again, the second most terrifying thing after cutting a child's head off, and finds Jesus.
Can we talk about the Thief in the Night movies real fast? Because, they did a lot of this kind of thing,
Yes.
Repent
Yes,
for the
we
day
can.
and repent or horrible things will happen to you. And then they, we're talking about guillotines cutting people's heads off. Scared the shit out of me as a young child. I mean, it took me years to get over the fear of what would happen if I missed the rapture. You guys want to just sound off on Thief in the Night or any of, I think it's a 4-film or 5-film series now. I don't know.
We've only seen 3 of them. If there's another one, I am so excited I can hardly contain myself. I love them so much. But, it's so hard to get in the mindset of a person like yourself that saw this as a believer, as a realistic thing. When I watch Thief of the Night, I'm pointing and laughing the whole time. And when we get to it's the second one that has the notorious guillotine scene in it, right? At the very end, they take this girl out and then they chop her head off. Or actually, they don't quite. We find out in the third one that she survives for a few seconds anyway. But they're chopping a child's head off in this one as well. And, as a secularist and as a grown-up watching this movie, it's hilarious. But if you stop for just a second and think about the 11-year-old or the 9-year-old that's being shown this horrible, horrible thing and being told, no, kids, this is going to happen, that sucks all the fun right out of it.
It's hard to go back in time and see the young child in the pew being told that this will happen. And at the end, of course, they have the inevitable altar call, and all these terrified, crying children run forward. And I say to this day, it's just child abuse. I mean, it's the abuse of the trust of a child to do this to young people.
Well, and you really don't have to look any further than the grown-ups who have already lost their faith and have been, agnostic or atheist for years, but are still waking up terrified of hell. That stays with you. That's psychological torment.
One of the wonderful things that we hear about our show on a pretty regular basis is people go, these movies terrified me, and I listened to your show and I laughed, and I'm so glad. I feel like I feel better now. It was so great to hear someone do this. And we hear that I get emails about this kind of stuff, and I know Noah and Heath do too, all the time, where people are just like, that guillotine scene was the scariest thing in the world, and listening to you in the background or listening to you after watching it be like, in my own way, really frees people in a lot of ways. And that's, not to get too full of ourselves, but that's one of the wonderful things that our show does, is it frees people from this sort of legacy of child abuse and this legacy of terror.
It's almost like Blasphemy Day, right? They used to scare the shit out of us with blasphemy. Oh my God, it's unforgivable. Like the rape of a child, that's forgivable. Jeffrey Dahmer, no problem. He says the salvation prayer in prison. He's in heaven with Jesus, with all of his victims, or some of them at least anyway. But, blaspheming the Holy Spirit, that's the one you'll never get away with, and you'll burn forever and ever and ever. And then here we are on the other side of that sort of looking glass, and now we're blaspheming left and right and having a hell of a time doing it. And there's a liberation in being able to do it without fear.
And, I kind of off just as a tangential to that point, how in the world does one grow up when one has this misguided notion that blaspheming against the Holy Spirit is a worse act than raping a child or stealing a cookie, just really buttresses against that point about just how abusive this is and how abusive this message is. Again, going back to matter of faith, this is being shown to high school kids that have grown up in an insulated culture, gone to a Christian high school and went to Christian museums and went to Christian amusement parks and listened to Christian music, and they're being told, no, this is why we don't want you going to a secular college.
Are these films being seen by anybody? Does anybody actually rent A Matter of Faith and watch it, enjoy it?
They make a ton of money. Earlier this year, we reviewed War Room, which was slightly more offensive than Birth of a Nation. And it was the #1 movie in the box office for a month. It's about a sassy old black lady who tells a younger black lady to stop bothering her drug-dealing boyfriend and pray for him in a closet to make him love her. and it was the #1 movie in America. And we had my friend Keisha Zoller on to review the movie, and I sat in the theater and just watched her and just ate my pop. I didn't watch the movie. I just watched Keisha react to an actress like, "Oh, not Chad, you know they ain't gonna let us not love Jesus." Go, totally do. I was like, man, when they take that paint off, that white actress is gonna get in trouble.
I saw the budget for God's Not Dead, the first film, $2 million. It grossed $60 million.
Yes.
You and I are in the wrong business, guys.
No kidding. Well, no,
the moment I get opportunity, I will turn on I will find Jesus in the middle of this conversation. If David R. White walks in here right now and he's like, make a Christian movie, I'll be like, sorry guys, I gotta go, because I'll be on a mansion full of money and I can make up a Christian movie. Water glasses aren't real. Prove they are. I win. I just made 6 movies. I just made 7 movies.
And if David A.R. White walks in, I am geeking out big fanboy style. I am we've seen so much from that guy now.
Yeah.
What's crazy is just because of the world we live in, we're going to Reason Rally, so I'm gonna run into Ray Comfort and I'm gonna be like, Ray Comfort, and he's gonna be like, oh, are you a fan? And I'm gonna be like, no, I hate you. You should call the cops. You should have someone call. All right, 3, 2, 1, go. Come on, I'll be the guy that bit Ray Comfort. And that's great. I'll take that legacy. They'll be like, yeah, that one guy just bit him.
And you know what? When you walk into a room, then I'm going to be fanboying over you when that happens. So,
right? You'll be like, that's the guy that bit Ray Comfort.
Is this a quest for relevance? Does anybody care what Ray Comfort has to say about anything?
I certainly hope not, but I mean, he's making a living at it. We've reviewed a couple of his
movie
movies
too. Yeah.
Yeah. He did. What was the Audacity?
Audacity?
Yeah.
Audacity, which is his anti-gay marriage movie.
Are he and Kirk Cameron still doing stuff in tandem, or have they sort of parted ways?
They make documentaries together, and they're all on Netflix, and they're amazing. They're like, Where Was God? Unstoppable. And all it is like Ray Comfort writes the words, and then Kirk says it. So he's like, hi, it's me, Kirk Cameron. You're probably wondering why Christians are doing so well right now. Please ignore the fact that I look like I opened the Ark of the Covenant a little bit since whatever show I was on went off the air. I'm having a great time. It's like blink twice if they're holding you hostage. Bo Burke made more convincing videos, Kirk.
You guys must have had a field day with Saving Christmas. Is there a review out for that somewhere?
Yes, there is.
Indeed.
Yeah, that was before we spun it off as its own show. But yeah, we definitely did that one. We did that one in theaters on opening night, and it was so much fun.
I mean, you have to admire the sheer effort.
I saw it twice in a row.
And dedication to be able to rewrite the entire history of the Christmas holiday. I mean, that's dedication, right?
Well, and the whole history of Christian religion, too, yeah.
That movie is like someone tortured Dan Carlin till he was insane. That's what that movie is. It's just him being like, all right, now that they've shocked me enough, I think that Christmas trees are crucifixes. Just don't do it. That's why he hasn't been producing episodes as quickly as we want him to. They've been torturing him into Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas.
All right, somebody set up film number 3 tonight. This, I've been looking forward to this one all week long. Set it up.
The third film that we're talking about is the greatest thing in the known universe. It is called International Gorilla Jays, and if the Christian movies we've been talking about, it's a fitting metaphor because Christians are crazy, but no matter what you try and do, Muslims will always out-crazy the Christians, and that is the case. This is a movie about Salman Rushdie, the real Salman Rushdie, the guy who wrote Satanic Verses, who lives on an island fortress beheading Muslims for fun when 3 brothers decide to kill him with the help of their Muslim faith. His sidekick is the head of the Israeli army. Yep. His other sidekick is a demon lady who has hypnotic eyes. There are several dance numbers and a killer disco floor filled with murder lights. is the craziest thing. The characters jump out at one point in the movie dressed like Batman, and it is never addressed. No one talks about it.
All of them dressed as Batman separately. Yeah.
Yes.
So the film opens up, right? There's a kind of a narration going on. It sounds like Vulcan to me.
Well, I love that opening sequence too, because what we open this movie on is seeing the evil guy layer, and they're all drinking alcohol as evil people are wont to do. But apparently the Muslim filmmakers don't really know how drinking works, so they have them like drinking champagne out of beer steins and things like that. You know, we see a solid, I think, 6 minutes of that.
Yeah, they rented some highball glasses, they rented some tongs, some ice, a glass, champagne, like everything. They had no idea what was happening.
And then because there's no way for them to inform you that they are the bad guys, the actual dialogue has them saying, "We are the thieves. We are the bad people. I mean, they literally, it's like they break the fourth wall and they tell the audience, we are the guys you are going to root against because we are bad."
He says, here we are all gathered together, the biggest crooks in all the land. The biggest crooks in all, and everyone's like present, like they're just counting off.
And he's wearing a red cowboy hat the entire time, and like what looks like a Best Western concierge outfit. I couldn't put my finger on exactly what he was supposed to be or do.
And it's all downhill from there, guys. That's the sanest this movie ever is.
He looks like a discount statue of one of those Italian chefs that stands outside a pizzeria. Like someone didn't want to spend all the money on the outside pizzeria statue, so they were like, that guy? And they were like, sure.
No, I love the henchman's name, Commander Jason.
Commander Jason.
Well, don't they call him Captain JC a couple of times or something like that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, little dig right there.
Why was this film 3 hours? I have no idea. And you get the vibe that somebody somewhere was forced to watch the entire thing front to back, including the credits.
Well, what would you have cut from that? I don't know if I was the editor there, I don't know how I would have got that down to 2 hours. But I mean, there's a lot of musical numbers you have to keep in. You have to keep those.
And the thing that you might, as a listener, having not seen the movie, the one thing that you might not really get about this is that this is actually, relatively speaking, for a Bollywood movie, this is a big budget movie. This is not something that's being shot on somebody's phone. There are multiple explosions and action sequences, and they crash a few cars. At least for Bollywood, this is what it looks like when they spend some money on this stuff. So
they had a penchant for choosing a subject. The camera would have a subject in frame, and then for some reason would dolly to the left or right with a huge solid object right in front of the lens. There's this one scene where it's like there's a series, this cluster of books.
Yes.
So you can't see a damn thing, and they were doing plants and trees. And, oh my God, hugely disorienting. Eli, what did you think?
Our operating theory for the camera work in this movie was that the cameraman died halfway through the scene, but they didn't want to get in trouble, so they were just like, lean it against the book. Well, you can see the pot. Fine, okay? It's fine. Allah is Lord, Lord is Allah. Come on.
I didn't really get the girl, right? She shows up, and again, you get the vibe that this is the forbidden fruit, right? They're saying that Islam should honor women, and women should be covered and should not be the seductress. And then the film takes, I don't know, these long close-ups of every curve of the woman's body. You get the vibe that while the very people who are saying this is forbidden and you shouldn't do it are secretly aroused by the fact that they are able to do it and get away with it.
Oh, no question.
Well, and this is also the scene where you get those weird, bizarre cuts where you only see half of her face from time to time and stuff like that. Yeah.
This character, who looks like someone's mom who runs an Indian restaurant, sings several songs throughout the course of this movie about how beautiful she is and how attracted to her you are, including a song where the main protagonist of the movie shoots her, and she goes, "Oh no!" That's a whole musical number. Is her getting shot and him just being like, "Oh no!"
It's the bullet of love. Yeah.
It's the craziest, most beautiful thing in the universe.
The film ties the elements. I mean, it's not just the defenders of the prophet, but the film ties nature into this battle against the evil, right? I mean, the lightning from the sky, the power of God, the elements themselves have determined that he will die like a dog.
Well, let's set this up. They capture the three brothers and they tie them in the least sane way possible. They chain them to a ladder. Everyone is chained to a ladder. And then they do, for the 85th time in the movie, a smack talk session where they say, like, "We will burn your body and then no one will eat the ashes." It's just the craziest thing. But they do that back and forth. And then he goes, "I have you." And they go, "Oh, blah, blah." They sing a song. Song. And then the Quran comes flying through the sky. Comes flying through the sky, followed by the words written. It's like North Korea. "Allah is Lord, Lord is Allah. Allah is Lord, Lord is Allah." It flashes across the screen. The Quran comes, and then it shoots little lasers, and this is literally the noise it makes. Pew, pew.
Yes.
And Salman Rushdie, author of the Satanic Verses, catches fire and goes and like melts, literally melts, just like Ark of the Covenant. I mean, they were like, "Oh, I liked Indiana Jones, do that," and they were like, "Sure, we'll just melt the guy." And I guarantee you that's what they did. There's no way that this movie, which had a laser death disco floor, figured out the practical effects from Indiana Jones. They drew straws and they were like, "All right, Dave, we're melting you." And he was like, "No, I always get melted." You can find just the last 2 minutes of the movie on YouTube, and it is the single most important thing you'll ever do in your life. Don't teach your children to read. Watch the last 2 minutes of International Guerrilla J.
Is this a genre, Islamic film?
We can't find anything anywhere. We recently discovered Nollywood Christian films, which are pretty fantastically close. For the first time, we just reviewed the first in a 6-part series called Vultures of Horror, which is a Nigerian film about Satanists who worship laser vultures, birds. It's crazy. And that's as close as it gets, but we have not found anything anywhere close to International Guerrillas.
Satanists who worship
vultures.
Laser vultures.
Laser vultures of horror. And they use them to like settle business deals. Like they don't just randomly they're like, "Oh, she gets more business than I do. Send the lasers of horror after her." And it's just sure.
Well, and if you thought that the setup for the bad guys in International Guerrillas was fantastic, this movie actually literally has the evil family sitting around going like, "Oh, if I was the village elder, I would be able to do more evil. Yeah, that would be some good evil. Evil is key." Those are actual lines from the movie.
While one of them is holding his severed head and has fire coming out of his neck. Do they ever talk about that? No, that never gets mentioned in the movie. It's an hour long.
This is your new normal, right? Do you ever get jaded by the insanity, or is it all just fresh every single day?
I can't watch regular movies anymore, because when I watch a regular good movie, I'm like, when are they going to talk about Jesus? Like, when are they going to talk about, like, I'll see a sex scene between two characters and I'll be like, "Oh, they're going to die. They're going to get eaten by locusts wearing crowns with feathered wings." It's common. I waited the entire time for the Dutch Girl or whatever, that movie that won all the Oscars. I was like, "Get him! Why aren't these other characters getting him?" I don't know. I didn't get it.
Noah, what's your take?
Well, no, what happens to me with these movies at this point now is that, I watch what would have 2 years ago been the most ridiculous shit I had ever seen in my life. And now I watch it and I'm like, "Oh, that was pretty good. The camera was more or less pointed at the character that was speaking or involved in the action much of the time. I don't have any notes on the lighting. The audio never completely changed quality on me in the middle of a sentence. That was a really good movie."
Is it hard to find these films, Heath? I mean, do you have to dig pretty far, or is it just like, where do we start?
Yeah, it's more like, where do we start? We already have a list of 300-400 movies somewhere, and we get constant recommendations, like the Nollywood film. That was a tweet we got a couple weeks ago, so we just decided to throw it in there. Yeah, it's a pretty deep well. It's a pretty deep well.
I'm making a note. I have to see. What was the laser Vultures of Death film?
It's called Vultures of Horror. It's on YouTube. It's one of a 6-part series. And it is the worst thing that will ever happen to you.
It's got a really good theme song, though.
Vultures of Horror. Vultures of Horror. It's auto-tuned like Art Kelly. Vultures of Horror. If you can cut that in, you should cut. It is the greatest song. It's my phone ring, and whenever anyone calls me, I'm like, ah.
How old's the film? Is it decades old? Because if it's old enough, I can get away with it.
Oh, no, it was made 30 minutes ago.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll take a look at it and we'll see. Maybe I'll get lucky and it's public domain. I kind of doubt it. And that's all I need is to get sued by some fly-by-night movie company. Of course, I
out of Nigeria, no less. Yeah,
exactly.
Go figure. Any other gems, real fast, before we get close to the end of the show? I mean, if our people were wanting to, obviously, I want them to listen to your show because your commentary is priceless. But give me some good stuff that we haven't talked about yet. Anything we missed?
I mean, I think it's vital that we talk about 2 of the most beautiful movies in all of cinema. And of course, I mean God's Not Dead and God's Not Dead 2. Can God's Not Dead 2 be crazier than God's Not Dead? Yes, it can.
Yes.
Is Kevin Sorbo the craziest character in the universe in God's Not Dead? Yes, he is. There's so many beautiful moments. Kevin Sorbo dies in God's Not Dead, and a minister runs over. He has no medical training. He puts his hands on him and goes, he is blood. He's full of blood. He dies, and then the first thing that guy says is, today is a good day. Everything you need to know about Christian movies is in that moment where a man gets hit by a car and dies filled with blood on the street. And the first thing the protagonist says is, today is a good day.
What was the story on that? He did some ultimatum to his class. He was going to flunk him if they didn't hold to his atheistic worldview. Or I couldn't bear to buy a ticket for God's Not Dead. I just couldn't.
So God's Not Dead is essentially this. Imagine a movie called Karate, which is about a kid who goes into a karate class. It's me. I'm 285 pounds. Goes into a karate class and they're just like, hey, do you know any karate? And he's like, no, but I'd like to fight the master. But in this movie, he does. He's just like, and the guy's like, what is that karate? No! He's just like, and he's just like, oh, how is your karate? Because he believes in his heart that he can do it. And the debate scenes I love A Matter of Faith because they're arguing about whether or not rocks are real. But the debate scenes are magical. He has because they got to present both sides. So he has the moment where he talks about Stephen Hawking's, says that, there's very clearly not a God or something like that, or whatever he says. He says something interesting and because he's Stephen Hawking. And then he goes, well, in my rebuttal, Stephen Hawking's might say this, but John Lennox says this. And it's like, John Lennox? Your rebuttal to Stephen Hawking? Annie Lennox is a better rebuttal to Stephen Hawking. She wrote songs. And the whole movie is just filled with this. There's the Muslim girl who's like listening to Corinthians in secret, and her dad finds out and he beats her and kicks her out of the house. And then the newsboys, all of whom look 85. They look like a witch brought Birkin bags to life. The entire cast of the newsboys, they just look like everyone's dad got divorced and started a band. That's what the news, and they sing God's Not Dead. And there's an atheist reporter who gets cancer for being an atheist, and then her boyfriend breaks up with her for having cancer because he's an atheist too. It's bonkers. And then movie 2 is crazier. It's actually crazier. We've done 4 hours on these movies.
I love the fact that God's Not Dead 2, our protagonist is an actor who is defending a god who burned witches while gaining fame for playing a witch. Exactly. The irony is thick. What's weird about God's Not Dead 2 is by the time she hits the courtroom, the entire case changes, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, there is never a case. They don't know what it is. So the judge is like, today we're here to determine when the movie will end. They promised I could hit the hammer. Craft service.
And at the end, what is she's vindicated in some way? She wins the case, whatever the case was, right?
We never know what the charges are.
There was never a charge.
The jury comes out and they're like, "We find the defendant. God's not dead."
Well, right. Well, I love too that apparently this court case took place in like the This Is Sports Center of Christian Apologetics. They're just bringing on every Christian apologist you've ever. What's his name? The first
Strobel.
one. They Strobel. It's like were they all in at the same time? This is interesting.
And by the way, I saw this in theaters, and I stood up and screamed at the top of my voice, "Lee Strobel!" But it's just a series of Christian apologists, because at one point the movie's about whether or not Jesus existed. So it's just a series of Christian apologists pretending not to have the jobs they have, being like, "Oh, me?" Because they bring the cold Christianity guy in, and he's like, "Oh, when I started thinking about this, I was an atheist. I hated God." And it's like, "No, dude, I went on your website. You did it. You were at some point an atheist, but not now."
You don't even have to use that. You don't even have to go that far, because what he says is, "I was a devout atheist when I started this." Like, what the hell does that mean? I've never met a devout atheist in my life.
I get the vibe. It's just kind of really a showcase piece, because they're trying to get people who won't read Lee Strobel to hear Lee Strobel's arguments, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the same reason why the right-wing comedians tend to not be as funny. I mean, I feel like if that's the message that you're trying to send, if that's what you're saddled with as your story, it's not gonna. There's no way to make that satisfying cinematically, and there's no way to make any of it make sense. Because you're right. Basically, the last act of that movie is a series of Christian authors reading you the back of their book.
Have you noticed how often this stuff seems obsessed with classrooms, right? It's all about the higher institutions of education. Actually, was God's Not Dead to college or high school?
It was high school.
Yeah. High school, all right. The institutions of learning, right? They're under attack by Satan. And so it just seems like every one of these movies ends up in a classroom somewhere with an instructor.
What's amazing about God's Not Dead 2 is that the evil ACLU lawyer, by the way, the villains in this movie are the American Civil Liberties Union. Amazing, incredible. But he comes out and he goes, "Tell me, did she ever try to lead students in prayer? Did she try to ever tell a child what religion to have?" And it's like, the people who made this movie are the people who do those things. Don't use yourself as the example. I never go up and I'm like, "Hey, would you ever eat 2 Subway sandwiches in a row?" Because I do those. That's a me thing. That's the thing. Eating the meatball sub and then being like, "Another, please." And like, it's not a bar, sir. Go back to the line. I don't use that as an example.
I order 2 simultaneous. It's not a problem. You just get both. You have to eat again.
Not wearing pants for a month in a row. Again, I don't use it as an example because it's part of my life. I don't make bald jokes. But Christians in Christian movies are constant, and we have a trope that we do in our show called Jingly Keys, because they'll constantly be like, "Well, how come God let grandma get cancer and burned down the farm? Because we've always been such good Christians." And there's a pause, and the other character goes like, "Yeah, man, that's why it's wrong." So we say jingly because it's just like,
no, it's so often you're just left asking yourself, like, okay, you guys know this is your movie, right? You didn't have to bring up the problem of evil. You didn't have to point out that this doesn't make sense.
You're the movie. You guys are the movie.
You guys are way too much fun. And there's way too much material to cover on one broadcast here. So I'm going to link to the God Awful Movies podcast in the description box of the show. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard tonight and you guys are a blast, I'm going to send everybody there and they can go check out a library so far of 30-some podcasts and going strong, right?
Yes.
All right, sir. Fantastic. Any final words before we wrap it up? Any final thoughts on any of these 3 films or the Christian film genre in particular?
Well, I think there's a very interesting thing going on in Christian cinema right now that I think you can really relate to from your history in Christian radio. Because the cost of production has gone down so much in the last 20 years, I feel like the goal now for a lot of these guys is to have, I've heard you talk before about the list, right? So here's the list of secular artists. Oh, your kid likes this artist. Here's the Christian equivalent. I think they're trying to do the same thing with movies. Like, oh, your kid likes Mad Max. Well, here's the Christian Mad Max. So I feel like we're just going to watch as everyone's favorite movie eventually gets a Christian form. And I'm really looking forward to, like, Christian Terminator and, Christian mall rats, etc.
I think it's really important to point out that David R. White looks like someone tried to forge his face into a sword. That's what I wanted to communicate that here.
Eli, when he's not on the radio, because I mean, I'm just trying to picture the man's. The things that come out of your mouth, Eli, just
this is clean meat. I was like, oh, we're on the Thinking Atheist.
The things that go into his mouth, you wouldn't believe. Yeah, vegetables.
Honestly, the business model aspect of Christian film is what strikes me, right? And when I was in Christian radio, I mean, we see behind the scenes. We realized that they saw a niche market. They saw there was an opportunity to go and fill a void and make a shit ton of money. And here we are. They're producing all these films on the cheap, and then they're targeting this sort of built-in audience of claptrap believers who are eager for 2 hours of theological masturbation. They essentially go in these little pods to support films that don't go beyond the pod, but they make enough money so that they can all walk. I mean, an independent film for $2 million making 60 is something that many mainstream filmmakers would just kill to be able to do.
Yeah.
Guys, they can just write their own checks.
Well, and then, I equate it to, like, I grew up in Detroit, and I was a big Lions fan, and they were terrible every year, but every year the stadium sold out, so they had no incentive to be good. And when you've got these captive audiences that are, hey, look, we got to show something at movie night at church, there's no incentive for them to make them any good. So that just means, that's job security for us.
You guys remember The Passion of the Christ? I mean,
yes.
Right? Mel Gibson's he's doing a church tour. I mean, he's marketing himself, and churches are like, oh, look who we got. It's Mel Gibson. That's awesome, right? They love it when secular celebrities all of a sudden find Jesus, and then they just grab him and say, hey, look who associates with the church and with our religion. So they bring him on stage, and they have these big rallies. And the whole time who knows what Mel's motivation? I'm not going to say I can read his mind. But I was thinking, if you were just a business person, you would be a genius, right? The highest grossing restricted film to that time, and I think for a decade after, the highest grossing R-rated film in history
until
was The
this
Passion
year.
of the Christ.
Until this year, Deadpool took the record. So
yeah. Hey, what you got? Forgive me, I haven't seen Deadpool yet. I know. I should have seen it. Have you guys gone? And what?
Yeah, it's great.
It was fun. It was fun.
I love Deadpool as a character. I'm a huge comic nerd, and I thought they served it really well. I also saw Batman versus Superman this year, so the fact that it wasn't Batman versus Superman was really good for me. Was really great. The fact that it had the characters in it, and they didn't shoot people with machine guns because he's Batman. Sorry, that's not here nor there. I'm sorry, it's not.
Look, I hated Man of Steel, guys. I mean, I despise.
Oh, I hate it. I have 10,000. We did a whole episode. Our first ever non-Christian movie, we did just like a bonus one, was about Batman versus Superman, because we saw God's Not Dead 2, and we were like, you know what? We're going to treat ourselves. We're going to see Batman versus Superman. That'll be fun. And then we all hated it so much, we were like, just turn the mics on, man. I need to talk. Talk to about this.
Well, you guys saw it, and I was like, why don't you I'll just laugh along with you guys.
The problem is that after watching Man of Steel and a quote-unquote climactic battle of two invincible people fist-fighting for 45 minutes, destroying the city of the people they are trying to protect, right? And then you've got the Jesus metaphor. But he had to come save us from the shit that he's responsible for in the first place. I don't know if you buy that metaphor or not.
And they spend the whole second movie being like, hey, you remember how crazy and stupid the first movie was? Well, that's why Batman's mad too that our movie sucked. And that's why he's gonna fight. That's the whole movie is Batman being like, why would you not go to a field? Right, a field. Man, I hope I don't make that exact same mistake in this movie.
Now, come on, is it that bad? Come on. I mean, is there a redeeming quality? Is there a reason I should buy a ticket or rent it at any point?
Do not see this movie. Don't say Batman versus Superman into a mirror 3 times at midnight, lest the movie appear behind you, Seth. It is.
And keep in mind, this is coming from a guy who just asked you to watch A Matter of Faith, International Guerrillas, and If Footmen Tire You. So I would take this one seriously.
Oh, you guys are way too much fun. I'm going to include that link in the description box. And best wishes with the podcast. All success. I hope you guys get a ton of listeners. And, honestly, what you're doing is You know, it's something I don't see enough of. When people take all this stuff so seriously, you guys just have a ball with it and expose it for the insanity that it is, and you do a great job. You've got great chemistry together. So thanks for the show. Thanks for what you do, and thanks for being on the broadcast today. It's been fun.
Thanks so much for having us, Seth.
Thanks for having us. Absolutely.